Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to ask you not to forget about Temple of Elemental Evil, my 2003 video game. Now you're probably going, I'm not going to forget about that. Why are you asking me not to forget about this? Well, let me just say that I've talked about different reasons I do this channel, and I think I found a new one. I do not want this game to slip away into complete history and no one ever mentions it or talks about it. Why am I bringing this up? Well, I was watching one of my favorite channels. It's called Wizards and Word Slingers. I'll put a link below. What I love about it is GM Jim, the host of the channel, will go through system mechanics on tabletop games. And he'll dive down into them in detail. What I especially like is he will show how a little change can have a big effect. He frequently does this by comparing older versions of D&D to newer editions and showing how just a word or an extra phrase inserted into an ability or a spell can completely change the usefulness or practicality or even the effect of that spell. So I really like the channel, watch it all the time. Last week, he mentions this book, The Art and Arcana of D&D, a visual history. That's the name of it. This book came out in 2018. Somehow I missed it. I was probably busy trying to get Outer Worlds out. So when I saw him mention it, and he said it was really good, I said, okay, and I really excitedly bought it. And got overnight shipping, was super excited, got it the next day, and I started going through it. Because it is, decades of D&D done with pictures. There were pictures of old modules with old maps for them. Lots of old magazines, not just the inside, not just the cover, but a lot of stuff that was inside. Old ads, which are funny. Old dice. I mean, remember, I still have my dice from my original basic set. So I was really excited to go through this. And about a third of the way in, you get to Temple of Elemental Evil, the module. And I was really excited because I saw it being mentioned. It had multiple 2-page spreads for the cover art, for the maps that were inside. It showed some of Gygax's original maps that he hand drew. And I thought, this is really cool. I kept reading, and there was no mention of that this was made into a computer game, 20 years after it came out. More than that. So I'm like, wait a minute. And so I jumped to the index and started looking up things they did mention. Because I'm like, maybe they just don't talk about, computer games. Nope. Pool of Radiance is in there. All the Gold Box games are in there. Baldur's Gate, Torment, Icewind Dale. They're all there. So I'm like, well, maybe they don't cover a lot of company. Well, BioWare's in there. Interplay's in there. They're all there. Doom is mentioned twice, and not for the reason you'd think, because of the Beholder. That's obviously from D&D. Nope, there's no mention of Temple 2003, no mention of Troika. And I remember thinking, okay, I did that mainly when I saw Temple about a third of the way through. I jumped to the index. I'm like, maybe that index is incomplete. Maybe it didn't index everything they actually wrote. So I decided I'm going to read the whole book. This book, let me show you. This book is 450 pages. It's a big book. It's very heavy. I read all 450 pages. I found one very oblique reference on page 320, which reads, thanks to Hasbro's relationship with Atari as its former owner, more computer games quickly followed. Temple was one of those computer games that quickly followed. Literally right after the time period this cuts off on. I think this went up to 2002, and it's like next year, Temple came out. Now, what's weird about that is Temple is the first game to come out in 3.5 rules. It was the only game computer game that's ever come out set in Greyhawk. And that's true even now, over 20 years later. And it's the only time Temple was converted to a computer game. You'd think it would deserve a little more than that oblique reference of more computer games quickly followed. No. Now, this is an art book. So I just have to point out at this point, and I'm not an artist, so I don't have anything to do with this. We took Zugdmoy from looking like this in the original paper and pencil module to looking like this in our computer game. This was considered so good that WotC made it canon. That's how Zugdmoy looks now. You would think that would get a mention. That would get a call out in an art book about the art history of D&D that has multiple spreads showing how particular monsters, maybe the Rust Monster or dragons, or particular characters like Driz T changed over the years. Zugdmoy is a perfect example of that change. And way more drastic than almost any of the other ones they showed. Now, you may be thinking, well, maybe they just don't have the space or whatever. Well, let me show you something, because I bought a lot of stuff. This is Goodman Games' very heavy box set of Temple of Elemental Evil. It is both... Oh, I gotta set this down. It's too big. It is a reprint of the old module with tons of extra stuff added. Old maps, notes, discussion about what the original game, how it was designed and all that. Plus, there's a remake into modern D&D rules. Even they mention Temple of Elemental Evil 2003. It's not a lot. This is all about the paper and pencil side. But they mention that Temple was made into a computer game in 2003. So then I went and pulled my old module out. This is the original Temple of Elemental Evil module that I owned since the early 80s. Notice it's spiral bound now, because when we made Temple, we asked the publisher for copies because we had a dozen people working on it. And I said, I really need to get them. I need artists to see what the art should look like, and what the level designers, I need them seeing the map layouts. The narrative designers need to see all the characters. And the pub just said, we can't get those for you. Sorry. So because we did not have time, and the whole game was supposed to be made in a year and a half, I chopped up mine so we could photocopy relevant sections and give them to people. Meanwhile, we went on to eBay and other sites and bought as many old copies as we could and gave them to people on the team. I just point that out. That's like, this is how dedicated we were to this game. Now, I mentioned before, Temple of Elemental Evil is my worst reviewed game, has the lowest review score. It's not my worst selling game, but it's close. Troika fans, whether they're in an interview or doing a video or even on the comment section of this channel, when they mention Troika, they mention Arcanum and Vampire Bloodlines like more than 90% of the time. And I get it. It wasn't most people's cup of tea, and it shipped buggy, and there were other issues with the writing. But all I can say is this book is a visual history of D&D. And Temple of Elemental Evil 2003 is part of that history. And it was sad to see it overlooked. I mean, here's the way to look at it. And here's how I'm looking at it. At the very best way of looking at it, we were forgotten. Maybe their research wasn't as in-depth, or maybe they just forgot to throw it in. That's the best way of looking at this. The worst way is that it was deliberately erased from history, that it's not something they want to talk about. Either way isn't really cool. Either way is something I don't like seeing. So many people worked so hard on this game. And for all the issues that game had in writing or code, art wasn't one of them. It was a beautiful game, and it deserved to be part of this art book. Anyway, so what I'm asking you now, hey, I've got this channel. I'm asking the people watching this channel, please don't forget this game. Just remember that people worked really hard on it. Beautiful game. Please don't forget it. And that's all.